these guys are like smart structures. They are the smart structures because, again, if we look at the achievements of the modern science, right, so you see these are complex polymers having the viscoelastic properties, which are, they are used as the kind of fitness tools as a byproducts of the high-level advancement chemical industry. But internally, these are smart structures which, happily for us, have their properties, mechanical properties, that cooperative properties, which are in the similar range to the natural fascia. So therefore, that's basically what we're doing, right? So you see, we're building the, kinematic linkage where you have the potentially responsive, remodeling enabled, capable, structure which has lost that cooperative smart structure, right? So we are bringing different kinds of interfaces which will be kinematically put in a certain specific kinematic relationship, right? And then we follow a rather strict algorithm how to bring that into that particular phase of which clicks into this activation, right? Because if you look at the sort of like even to the classics, right? What we have for any muscle fascia component and so on, there's going to be what? There's going to be the stage of the passive lengthening, just passive lengthening, the change of length without the tone. That's kind of a part that is universally known, obviously, but just gets very quickly rewinded because the focus is on the contractile properties on the other side, right? On the agonist side. But then you will have the other thing, which will be the stretching, right? Stretching is the micro-injury to the tissue with the attempt to make it longer. So passive lengthening, forced lengthening. But then what we have in between is that exact window that we are looking at, the so-called linear phase. That's exactly when you have, the best thing is to get the example of people with the curly hair and you are here, right? So you see again, if the early phase, that's the waved hair, because all of the structures are wavy, right? So you see that's a so-called crimp. So when it's in the crimp phase, your body, let's say you have no way of assessing how much the length of the hair has changed. So it's still, so far, it's not on the map. Right. Until if I pull it like this, that's stretching, that's the micro-injury. But the fine element is there when I'm actually bringing it, and now when it came to this linear phase, now it got indexed. Okay. So that's that indexing transition. So it was off the map, and then the 1 to 2% window, that's where the tendon, the linear phase of the tendon responds. That's where it gets on the map, right? So you see, therefore, what we're actually looking for, our smart structures, thank you very much. So they are the ones that have this fixed range of these linear responses. That's why what we're training your helping staff for, right, is to follow very specific, we use the interfaces and we use a very specific algorithm, right? How to get through that crimp phase to neutralize all that kind of waviness and the slack and so on, and how to that establish the contact, get to that connection phase, right? So when we actually bring it on the map, and then make that phase last in a sort of extended fashion, but without going into the micro-injury phase of making it uncomfortable and causing the stretch and so on. Because the stretch as the local ruining, that's the unsustainable thing in the areas which are otherwise, like really poorly circulatory, excluded from the other maps and so on. Yes. So that's where all the collection of the funny looking tools, right? I think that this is very important to also to convey this message that these are funny looking tools, but these are actually the high level achievements of the modern science in the form of being the smart structures. And in fact, if you think about this way, your structure at the time of that crisis, collapse and so on, has lost a lot of its cooperative smartness. So, and the thing is, but it still has the remodeling ability at the local level.
Yes.
So that's where our window for improvement is. Not on the miracle of, oh, okay, we're going to kind of get the cosmos connection and sort of just wire it through your, damaged spinal cord, right? So the window is exactly there, and that kind of linearizing phase, and how we can make those structures smarter, and start enabling the cooperative systems so they will be helping you. So that you can, with that minimal of the competitive and the, the neuromuscular component that you still have, that you will be able to leverage it to expand and kind of give it the much farther reach, so that the structure would be smart and integrating into the cooperative fashion, helping. So that's where the whole thing is, right? So cooperative, smart structures using the funny looking smart interfaces, right? So you see smart structure interface, and that's why the interface is such a critical thing, right? But then obviously different elements require different things, right? Different types of the interfaces. Where there is the joint capsule, it has its own linear phase, its own limits, but it's distributed, so you have to get more volumetric, right? The connections between the transitions from the skin through the fat slab to the muscular slab, all the way to the, say, to the rib cage, right? That's a different type of the layout. So therefore, the type of the loading that we are looking at there is going to be different. So in that sense, you might be thinking of this as kind of working as if we're trying to realign or kind of lift up the flopped fish scales, right? So you see, imagine if that each and every angular velocity, angular connection there, the smart structure was able to perform, of the back was able to perform as the fish scales of, like this locking fish scale of at different angles, and then they all just like plump, collapsed and flattened. What do we need to do? We need to lift them up so that they will be able to respond to the loads coming at different angles. So that's where we will be using sort of this type of the more sand balls on the other ones, right?
Yes.
Or when we need but on the other hand, we need to get the global response, right? The uniformity, the uniform response of all sort of different directions, and how do we get the full three-dimensional response, which will go in, out, in all directions, right? Front, back, left, right, diagonally, top, bottom. So that's where we would be using the next format, right? So you see those bigger balls, right? So like this type of stuff. Right, so you see this one is also a smart structure within, because it has the predictable linear phase, but now this thing is comparable to you in size. Right, so you see, if this is not comparable to you in size, but this is comparable. So therefore we can use this as the interface through which we can impose that uniform three-dimensional redistribution.
Yes.
So that's where we use that principle of the common tensional denominator. So where there is an interface on the front, interface is behind you, and then basically what is our goal? We want to balance that linear phases between what's to your front and what's to your back. So in that sense, your body just being a transmitter in between, so it becomes part of this common tensional denominator, right? Before, after, if we balance before and after, well, the in-between has to be able to adjust to this particular
integrate.
That's it. So it becomes like a very straightforward equation. So, and again, that's the logic. We want to reinstate this common tensional denominator, some reference, so that different structures could be able to rebuild their cooperative base, right? To be cooperative, they need common reference. The same linear phase that all of them would recognize and say, oh wow, by the way, this is the same linear phase. it's all the same for us, because otherwise the stiff structures, they have their own range and rate of responses, right? The super weak ones, they have their own rate, and then how do you manage to balance them?
Right.
So that's where we are getting to this sort of bigger logic and, you know, getting the picture of, but it's a difficult vocabulary to bring.
Of course.
Because, you know, until today, this whole field has been, you know, let's put it, it's
Overlooked.
yeah, it's relatively lazy. You know, when you have such a comfortable and such a powerful explanation, you know, it just doesn't encourage any curiosity, right?
Right.
You know, like, it's just so natural. Okay, that was those were the set of wires which were connecting to the individual, you know, to the individual sort of actuators, the muscles which are exerting and function, right? And now those wires are irreparably damaged.
Cancels out all possibilities.
That's it. So, you know, basically, unless there's, you know, whatever the microchip industry,
Right.
you know, the only hope there goes for the microchip industry and for
The bionic man approach.
bionic man approach. That's it. So basically, then it's just being postponed towards the bionic man. So, and again, it's explainable, understandable, whichever way, right? So that, you know, just there's not much to pursue in this department.
Impetus to explore
Yeah, that's
other
it.
possibilities.
That's it. That's it. So it's just kind of, if certain door looks so obviously shut and sealed,
They don't.
that
People don't look beyond it.
that's